Hey, welcome back to Get a Load of This Trucking Podcast. As always, your host, Cameron Pechia. I am super pumped about today. I know a lot of times I get other industry professionals, whether it be from Kenworth or Chris Spears from ATA, Rebecca Brewster from Atri and those kind of folks. And every now and then, and I want to bring the real side of freight from people that are in the trenches every day or have done or in the seats where you guys are. So today's guest, I'm so excited to get into it. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on introductions because I feel like unless you're living under a rock, you're going to know who this next guest is. So I want to welcome to the platform our special guest, Chad Boblett. Chad runs Rate Per Mile Masters. That, along with a whole slew of other things and just value he brings. But Chad, what's happening, man? Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm at home currently, and hopefully the sound of these people cutting down trees behind me doesn't bother you all.
No, I think I can't hear anything, and it looks like you're increasing the value of your property right now, is what I see.
Yes, yes, we had some wind damage. It knocked some trees down, and then done damage to the other trees, and
Uh,
so now we're just yeah. Hopefully that doesn't it start. You get more of a view of the lake
I love
and
it.
all the animals that come back there.
I love it. And you're coming out of Kentucky, right?
Lexington, Kentucky. Yes,
There you
my
go, man.
realtor says I'm the only person she knows that lives in the city limits of Lexington and have deer in my backyard.
Man, I love it. Wildlife's great and like the outdoors. I'm up in the Pacific Northwest, so obviously it's a whole different vibe, but similar as far as the greenery and stuff goes. So
Oh
I
yeah,
enjoy that too. Deer, elk. Shoot, we had a bear, cougar up where I'm at just recently, so you got to kind of keep an eye on the kids. So
yeah. I had a coyote come running back behind here once. Yeah,
cool,
yeah,
man.
and a distraction when I'm working at my desk is the fish that jump out of the water. They
Yeah,
have
you get
huge
out there with a pole. Take
yeah,
a quick
like
fishing break.
yes. I mean, I think about that all the time.
Nah, man, I love it. So I want, and I mean, I'm sure everyone that's on this platform has heard about, if not been impacted or influenced by per mile masters. I know you had the website. I know that you launched into the Facebook group, but just give a quick overview, and then you have a cool story about how that even came to be. So I want to
Yes.
hear that, man. Let's dive into that real quick, and then we'll talk about what you do and the group as a whole, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, well, I've told uh, people that do know me, they've probably heard me tell the story many times. But starting the Facebook group, whenever I got into trucking as an owner operator carrier, not as a company driver, I didn't get excited about trucking until I got my first truck, and um, and I'm a talker. Before Facebook, I would show up at these. I would show up at a shipper or receiver, waiting to get loaded, waiting to get offloaded, and I would go annoy other drivers. What are you doing here? How'd you get here? What load did you pick up? What are you bringing? And then I would talk about the things that seemed like nobody wanted to talk about, but I would talk about it. It was like kind of nosy type questions. You don't ask somebody how much they get paid, but me, I would ask them all the time. What did you get paid on that load? And the Landstar guys, I would like talking to them. They were kind of similar to me. They're owner operator carrier. They're just leased onto someone. There's many companies like that, and I would love talking to the owner operator carriers that were leased onto a company to see what are they doing. And I have no from the day one. I would tell people, I would tell all the trucking companies, I have no problem at all putting another trucking company on the doors of my truck. But show me the numbers. Let me tell me the numbers. And that was my curiosity. Who's out there doing better than me? And I still got my name on my truck. Nobody's during that 12 years. Nobody was doing better than what I was doing when you compared the numbers. I mean, some come close, but anyway, that was my whole idea of asking these people that at the beginning, and then making friends along the way. You just came out of Florida. What'd you get going in? What do you got coming out? And then I would do the numbers in my head. Does it make sense to do that? And talking. And so then I got into Facebook, and I'm like, well, let's create a Facebook group. Instead of calling these people going down the road all day long, I can put them all into one place and talk to them. And that's kind of how the group started. And then it grew in popularity. At the very beginning, if you go back 9 years when the group started, you would see a lot of the posts at the very beginning was, "I'm in Florida. I'm coming out. This is what I got. This is the broker I got it with. This was my rate." And as it grew, we kind of got away from that. But that grew in popularity because for me to tell someone I got $3 per mile, I got $4 per mile, and be able to show them details of my rate sheet, and I got it from this broker. Go to this broker if you want to get this type of rate. And I got, a FEMA load. I mean, those were exciting loads to talk about, and that it gained popularity. A lot of people came to the group to be a part of that. And then I started getting endorsements, and that just grew. That brought in a whole flood of people. And then you got to look at when the group started. 2000. A little bit after 2011. Well, that's when I started as an owner-operator carrier, 2011, and that kind of relates to around that time frame. The spot market was a whole different animal than what it is now. At that time, we were coming out of, and a lot of people says, "Oh, you got lucky when you got started, Chad." Maybe I did get lucky. I mean, it was probably a whole lot better starting in 2011 than it was in 2009, as they were coming right out of the financial crisis. But the thing that I did, one of my first companies that I partnered with was DAT, selling the load board. But at that time, it was a lot of people didn't use DAT to do what I was doing, make a living off of DAT. That's what I was doing. And at that time, most people looked at working with brokers and using DAT. I'm going to use the negative word that people hate. They used it as a backhaul service. And that's the way a lot of people used DAT to find their load to get back to their customer. I was doing it to go out and go everywhere else and take advantage of that, of where all the good paying loads were. And then so my subject to a lot of people was, if you can use DAT I would much rather work with the brokers than work with a direct shipper. If you work with a direct, everybody has their pros and cons with that. I mean, the thing was, with a direct shipper, you would have to be at the same rate for 6 months at a time. But if you're running a spot market, you can take advantage of getting into a hot market and getting really high rates. And that was the kind of thing that I love. That's the reason why I named the group Rate for Masters.
Man, I love it. Yeah, and that's a cool background, a cool story with it's funny you mentioned, it's like it's kind of nosy when you start asking the questions, and in my opinion, those are the hard questions. And I think the reason people make it uncomfortable is they either don't know, they might be embarrassed about the rates they're hauling, or they don't want to know what could be better because they're comfortable in their own bubble and like it works for them. But I know that growth comes when you get out of your comfort zone. So I think those questions are necessary. And I love it too, because you look and you saw the need, you filled the void. You said, you know what, I'm going to embrace technology in a way that others aren't, because you can only talk to so many people, as you alluded. So put them in a group, get them together. Let's be somewhat transparent. I think it holds accountability to brokers, DAT, to whoever. And I love that about DAT. They'll post the rates and their lanes and their averages and all that kind of stuff. It's a huge benefit. And I agree. I think brokers are a huge asset to trucking companies. A lot of people get a negative light shed on them, and for good reason for some, but brokers can be good friends of yours as long as you treat them right and you don't bail on them, come in and out like a goldfish seeing something sparkly, right? I do think there's a ton of value. And if that is your first true partner there, you've held true to that relationship and you've got them to this day, because I know you're a huge advocate of DAT.
Yes, and I have other partners as well. Load. I mean, that's who I used from the very beginning. I've always used them. Yes, it's where most of the brokers are. It's a program, it's a load board that I've taken advantage of throughout the years to maximize profits and make as much money as I can. At the very beginning, when I first started, it was countless numbers of owner-operator carriers that would tell me, you can't just run the spot market and make it. You cannot do it. I mean, I used to get told eventually the tables are going to flip and you're going to see the downside and you're not going to make it. I mean, that was a dozen years ago, over a decade ago.
And here you are.
100% of my freight is always, I would 99% of my freight is come from brokers, freight brokers. I mean, I've done some shipper stuff, but it's never panned out to where I like doing shipper freight. As soon as the spot market starts picking up, I'll see you later, sayonara. I'm going back to the brokers. I'm not doing this furniture load from a shipper down the road.
Yeah, I think a lot too is product of environment. Like I grew up, my family's in transportation and trucking, and a lot of them were dedicated lanes from up here in the Pacific Northwest to Florida. My aunt and uncle would team drive, right? They'd come back, we're in the shop around the truck and that kind of stuff. So from early on when I started getting introduced into the transportation industry, and I was in construction trade and other things before I got into the career I'm in now. Um, all you know is what you see, I feel like, unless you're out seeking education, asking the questions like you did. But let's back up just a touch, because I always find it fascinating on why people got into trucking. So what did you do prior to trucking? What's your upbringing and background that led you to trucking?
Oh, okay. Well, and that's another story that I tell quite often because people like to hear it. The background. As soon as I finished high school, I went. I didn't have a desire to do college. I early on I knew probably junior sophomore year I'd already had it planned in my head that I wanted to go to the Marine Corps. Did that. I went to the Marine Corps. Did 10 years. I always believed I was going to probably retire in the Marine Corps. I loved the Marine Corps. I loved it until I went to Iraq, and then after that, I didn't want to have nothing to do with it again because I did everything I wanted to do. That I did. Plus, I was going to have to go back to Iraq if I stayed in. If I did stayed in longer than 10 years. Anyway, so that pushed that. I instead of reenlisting, I went ahead and got out unplanned. And I pursued being a state police officer, but you have to wait until academy starts before you can get into the police, until you can get into being a state police officer. I didn't want to be a city cop. I wanted to do the state police thing. And I could not wait until they couldn't give me a solid date when they were going to start the academy. So I went. Back then, we used newspapers to look for a job. We don't use it.
Classifieds.
That was 96, 97 time frame. And when you go to look at the job ads in the newspaper for your area that you're living in, the thing that just popped out in every single newspaper was everybody needed truck drivers. So and it would have these big banners, come drive for us, and we'll pay for your training. I ended up paying for my own training, and that was probably the best way to do it. And the instructor at the school said probably the best place for me to go work for, the type person I was, and he was a retired truck driver, was for TMC, which is probably one of the hardest companies to flatbed. And back then we used paper logs. I mean, I remember. So it was a very hard company, very, very, very hard company. But I thought it was awesome of how much more money you could make in trucking working for them, and it was based on a percentage. You got paid based on a percentage of what the load paid, and so that got me started with the numbers. The dispatcher would give me a load, and I would figure out how many miles it is and how much money I was going to make doing the load. That kind of helped me out, establishing rate per mile is important, and that every mile you put on that truck is work. You're holding a steering wheel and having to execute that, and where you end up, and what you get coming out of those areas. Anyway, did that for a year. For a year, went to McLean, and I'll wrap it through this because a lot of people's heard these stories. Did that for a year. McLean, I wanted to get a job where I could be home more often, so I went to McLean. That was even more of a demanding job, physical demanding. You're offloading the whole entire. So when you hear people say, "Oh, I don't like doing multi-stop loads," at McLean we had like 20 stops in one day.
Oh, man.
And this is a huge semi-tractor trailer, and you're offloading the entire trailer by hand. Not only are you dropping a ramp coming in and out of the back, but you have to climb inside a refrigerator part of it, climb up in it, get stuff out of there, and then go to the freezer part of it, grab some ice cream out of there, and take it into not a regular Walmart that you're used to going to. You're going to like 7-Eleven, mom and pop gas stations. The funny part of that is I stayed with them 3.5 years, something like that. But there toward the end, I knew I was getting ornery. I didn't like being there. My knee. I had hurt my knee, and it would just hurt so bad. And I'd already knew that the time was running out for me because I was going to have surgery on my knee to fix it. So what the funny thing is that when I would go to these 7-Elevens, they would want you to park like where the Coke man parks, like across the parking lot, and carry the stuff all the way to the door. Not me. My knee was hurting. I would back up to the front door of the 7-Eleven, drop the ramp, and I would get it to where I would pull the semi in the trailer right into the gas pumps. You couldn't get gas because my semi would be right there, and I would back up to the door as if I was backing up to a dock, when I dropped the ramp, I would use the ramp to hold the door open. And the 7-Eleven clerk would come out saying, "You can't do that." I said, "I'll be offloaded by the time you run me off. I'll be done with you." and you drop all your stuff. Here, sign here, and I'll leave. He's like, "Well, you can't just put it right here in the middle of the floor. Hey, if you sign it, I'll move my truck and I'll be out of your hair." I mean, it was. Anyway, I knew time was coming up, was ending for me, and so that was the funny part of it. Then I had to had to have surgery on my knee and my neck. I'd injured it probably over working so hard that in the Marine Corps and throughout my life. Flatbed wasn't a good thing either. I mean, probably jumped off the flatbed, damaged my knee and stuff. Anyway, it caught up with me. That put me out of work for 9 months. Going through physical therapy, I got paid short-term disability. It was bad. It was really bad during that time because I had to send my wife and kid. My wife is from Japan. Had to send her, my 2 newborn children. Had 2 newborn children. Had to send them to Japan to live with my in-laws. It was like I lost everything. I had to put my house up for sale, and that was right after the housing crash, and you couldn't sell houses at that time. So I found someone to rent it, so that I broke even. The one thing I did keep, the one thing I did not destroy was my credit. That comes into play later on in this story I'm telling you about. I didn't destroy my credit, and at the end of that 9 months, of being on short-term disability, I was told, "Hey, we're going to have your short-term your disability is running out. You're not going to get no money anymore." And I had left the house I was living in, the beautiful mansion. I was living in a motel. I went from being in the Marine Corps to now living in a motel. I used to have a beautiful house, a beautiful wife and kids, all that. Now I'm down to nothing, with crutches because of the knee problem. Anyway, what am I going to do? Well, I didn't lose my license. I still had a CDL license. Didn't hurt my credit because I always paid my bills. Had good credit. Even had renters in the house. They were making the payments on it. So I was able to sell the Infiniti G35 that I had because I couldn't pay for it. So living in a motel, all that gone. What am I going to do? Well, I always wanted to be an owner operator, and that was the thing. When I would go to these truck stops, I love talking to the guys that had the nice decked out trucks. Because if you talk to someone with a crappy beat up truck, driving for another company, those people always had failure stories. I want to talk to people that had success stories. The bigger that the bigger that truck is, the more I want to.
It's the trucking podcast. You can cuss. You're good. Okay.
The bigger that truck was, the more I wanted to talk to that driver, and I want to hear the success stories. Kind of like what you do when bring these people on with talking to the podcast. That was the thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to talk to these drivers. So that enticed me. I'm like, I've always wanted to be an owner operator. This is my only chance to do it. If I don't make it, then okay, they take the truck. I don't know what happens at that point, but I've already lost everything. I have nothing else to lose, right? I've already lost everything. So if I attempt this, maybe I make it, maybe I don't. I'll still have my driver's license, my CDL license. I can go drive for somebody else. Anybody will hire me. It's not what I really want to do. Anyway, so couldn't get. Another huge problem in this industry is for the first time, someone that wants to be an owner operator for the first time. It's so hard for those guys to get financing. The only people they can get financing from is like a loan shark, where huge, outrageous interest rates. Nobody will give them a loan. I mean, the banks. I mean, that was the thing that the banks were telling me. The banks are saying, "Yeah, you've never owned a trucking company, and you're buying a truck to start a trucking company. We don't do startups like that." I mean, it was just one bad story after another where they wouldn't give it to me. So I'm here in the motel. I have to go. I had a PO box that I would go check my mail at, and because I had good credit, I would always get these credit card offers in the mail. And I remember laying in bed like, how am I going to get my wife and kids back? How am I going to get out of this situation? I'm in a bad situation. What am I going to do? I want to get this truck. I want to buy a truck. What am I going to do? So at the middle of the night, it came to me. I'm going to go get all those credit card offers that are in that PO box because that was the only mail I was getting. I remember checking the mail and I would get them I would rip them up, throw them away. I don't need no credit cards. But I'm like, damn, the thing on that credit card statement says 0 interest for 12 months. And I'm like, damn, so what's the catch here? Why don't everybody do this? I'm going to apply for all these damn credit cards. I got 4 of them in the mail. And I don't know how long you're gonna let me talk, but this is another really fun part of getting started. I didn't know nothing about buying trucks, knew nothing at all. but I knew where truck paper was because I used to look at truck paper. That my dad, I don't know how long you've been in trucking, but my dad, well, he would come in off the road and he would bring home the truck paper. Back then,
Yep.
it was like a paper, a real paper, and it had all these trucks. It had all these prices in it. And when my dad would bring it home, I would go through it. And this was at 6, 7 years old. I would go through it and put X's on all the trucks he don't need to buy, and I would find the cheapest one. I would say, Dad, you need to buy this one. It's only selling for $5,000. And my dad, he knew more about trucks than I did. But that was a fascinating thing that I did as a kid growing up. So I went. That was the only thing I knew when it was come time to buy a truck was go to truck paper. That's fine. Let's do like the thing I was doing as a kid. Well, the only thing I knew was, all right, well, the truck with the least amount of miles should have the most amount of life left to it. And I look, my price range is $35,000. That's all I can spend. That's all these credit cards are going to give me.
Your line of credit.
$35,000. And I looked at all 48 states, and I narrowed it down. What truck has the least amount of miles? I found a red Volvo with 410,000 miles on it. I said, no matter where this truck is, I'm going to go buy it. Just so happened the truck was here in Lexington.
Oh,
Unbelievable.
no way.
Right here where I'm at.
No way.
6 miles down the road. And of course, I went and bought it. I applied for the credit cards, got the credit cards, went there, and now you can get the same dealer still works there. You can go if you ever call them and talk to them. They would say, "Yeah, we know Chad. He came in here, and this was right after the financial crisis. We're going to see some of the same stuff that happened during the financial crisis in the next 6 months. So they still had inventory, and they were selling it. I mean, this was a decent truck they're selling for $35,000. And I could not believe out of all 48 states, the one truck I found at that $35,000 price range was right here. It was kind of like it was meant to be.
Meant to be.
I went in and I said, so I want to buy the truck, and I'm going to use these 4 credit cards to buy it. They started laughing at me, and I'm like, what's the deal? What's the problem? You have a mechanic shop and you sell parts. They use credit cards. You can't use my credit cards to do this. And I think they were willing to work with me because they had a good size inventory of trucks on their lot. They needed to sell them. But I remember them laughing at me, and but they still did it. They still sold it. They said, well, okay, we'll sell it to you. I lived in Lexington, right down the road from them. They sold it to me. And I was so broke when I started that I remember that I had to, I was like literally used all the money I had to get started. And the truck came with a half tank fuel, had 150 gallons. So, on each side. And so altogether, probably around 150 gallons. I remember I had to, whatever the first load I got, I had to make sure that I could complete the load and get paid on the load before I went and did another load. And that was the greatest feeling ever when I did that first load and I was able to top those tanks off, and fill them up all the way. I'm like, from then on, I said, I'm going to make a lot of money. And here I am today.
That's just history. Chad, that's I had no idea, first of all, because I had not heard that beginning story. And that's incredible. That truly is inspiring. That's a great story, Chad, from pretty much rock bottom, homeless to, and I don't want to say homeless, but you know what I mean, living in a motel and that kind of thing to coming up on fortune. And what are the odds? It's in the town that you're at. You find this, truck papers. Yeah, they've been around forever, obviously digital format now. And I recommend everyone go out and check the values and the prices of the truck, because they'd be amazed at what the values and prices have done lately. And they're probably undervalued on all their equipment. But
I would add Taylor Martin to that if you want to stay up with the latest.
100%. Yeah, there's so many good resources. It's hard for me to pick where to begin with the different things that you do, but I think at the core, so I do want to touch on, you started obviously post the initial recession in 07, 08, and I actually got into insurance for construction and transportation in 07, 08. So same story. It's like the worst possible time to get in that. But I also think luck plays a factor because, like you, I didn't have a ton of options. I grew up, not with a ton of money, hardworking background, my single mom, so I had great examples of what to do and who I want to work with and the type of people that I wanted to help. So that led me to that. For you, what was the environment like? Because and I don't want to say I'm guilty. It's only because of who I know, who I talk to and that kind of stuff. People are like, hey, you can't make a living on the spot market. Because I think the spot market, the common, perception of that is it's an inefficiency of shipping freight. So then it ends up on the spot market. Therefore, they got to bid it out to get the loads moved. And I think as time evolved, from talking to people like you, guest on the podcast, working with so many different trucking companies, I think it's a valuable piece of the equation to have access to the spot market, because when it booms, and you can follow money around, and you can specialize in freight, and you can niche in regions, and you can follow, produce or fruit out of the Northwest and fruit out of Florida. And there's all kinds of ways that you can utilize this in your strategy, along with, if they've got a bigger fleet, let's use some contracted freight, let's use some dedicated shippers, and whatever the case may be. You did it, though, as an owner op, through the spot market, through different economies, through different cycles, and through different everything. So talk about that journey. How did you succeed early on? What was it like? What was the roller coaster? How cyclical was it? And then let's come out of COVID and let's talk about what COVID did and what it's doing right now and where it's going to go in the next 6 months, because I think that's where people need the most help. You have a ton of valuable history, which is why I'm so happy you came on. We got a veteran on the podcast that's done what you're doing as the owner op listening to this, or somebody wanting to take from a company driver or a lease operator or whatever to go owner operator. Hopefully this will inspire some of those folks. Let's talk about that. So tell me about the economy, the freight, what you saw, all that stuff.
Well, if you, looking back, when I did come in, it was a scary time. I never experienced the owner operator carrier during the crash, and like when I talk to people now, say one of my good friends, Steve does flatbed. He's an older gentleman, was in the Marine Corps as well. I go to him for a lot of wisdom, and I remember him telling me that during the 08, 09, like I do a lot of comparisons. Like, are we now in a worse situation than what it was then? I can show, and on my Facebook group, Rate Per Mile Masters, if you follow it, I know you do. I show graphs all the time where, hey, this is what the events that are taking place now have never happened in history, and it's way surpasses what we've seen in 08, 09. So when I talked to Steve about Steve, what is the spot market? Is it worse now than what it is now? And one comparison that he gave that's very interesting is right now, he just bought a new truck not too long ago. And so he has a friend, a dealership friend that he talks to. And he noticed that the dealership, the truck lot is now starting to fill up. There was a time where you couldn't buy a truck. It was very hard during the COVID period. It was really hard to buy, especially a new truck. You were on a wait list forever. So I apologize about that. Look who's calling me. Sammy Lloyd. You know who Sammy Lloyd is?
Who is that?
Sammy Lloyd? I'll talk to him in a minute. But if you don't know him, he's a YouTuber. He's another YouTuber. I do Facebook. I don't do YouTube. But at Sammy Lloyd, it's funny that he calls me right when I'm doing this because he's a good YouTuber. Down to earth guy. He's a really good, cool person. But he's calling me at the same time doing this. I didn't mean to interrupt the podcast. Anyway,
no,
so
Steve
says a good way to interpret. Well, he was telling me, he's like, the truck lot is starting to fill up, starting to have a lot more trucks on it. People are turning in their trucks. That's what his dealer friend says. Says now, he's like, he's getting more returns of people that bought trucks than he is selling trucks. But he said, but compare that. He's like, yeah, that looks bad. But if you compare towards the end of the disaster of the financial crisis, that was the last period where it got really bad that, I wasn't a part of. I was driving a truck, but I wasn't an owner operator carrier. He said during that time, that same dealership would have to go rent land, for lots and farmland to put all the repos that the trucking that lot was receiving. All the repos that were coming in would fill up lots. So like that's what happened then, and we're not there yet. But here's the thing. I try to stay up to date with what's going on, financial stuff, and a lot, even though we might start recovering, the stock markets might start going up again, but the damage that's already happened, the trucking bleed out has not stopped yet. Freight Waves did a really good post on this. It's what we have added so many owner operator carriers to the industry that we're actually, if we stayed on the same track, we're living in 2030. Like that many people jumped in the spot market during when the boom was taking off, like, a couple years ago, during that time, right as we were coming out of COVID, trucking was so lucrative that we got a flood of people that got their authority, and so many that it would usually take until 2030, if things were normal, for that
Yeah.
many people to come into trucking. So the reverse has to happen. A lot of those people have to leave. Now, the thing that I think about that I've been looking at is Donald Bachman. You might see him on CNBC sometimes. You know who I'm talking about? Donald Bachman.
Yep.
I
Yep.
hope I'm saying his name right. I've met him a few times. Great guy. He's very knowledgeable. He did a speech one time at DAT Con. I was the opening speaker. The next day, Donald Bachman was talking. And anyway, one of his slides said you can't. I got to be careful in saying this on YouTube or Facebook. You can't. But his slide said you can't kill an owner operator with cheap fuel. And there was a period. Where rates before COVID. There was a period where rates were kind of low and they weren't going back up. Everybody, brokers want rates to go up. They get a percentage. Everybody wanted rates to go up. Well, why are rates not going up? And the thing is that all the owner operators at that time, you're not going to kill them off. You're not going to get rid of them with cheap fuel. But at that time, we had very cheap fuel. You can make all kinds of mistakes. You can be the worst. You can be a really bad trip planner and go 100 miles out of route because you have a girlfriend or you want to go to a casino or whatever. You want to go home and go 100, 200 miles out of route. No big deal, because fuel was was a lot cheaper than half the price of what it is now. So reverse that, and what happens whenever fuel goes up really high the way it is? The average price of diesel right now in California is over $6. That's insane. That's almost brings tears to your eyes if you have to pump a whole 300 gallons, 150 gallons. So anyway, if you can't kill an owner operator with cheap fuel, but what's the reverse? If you have really high fuel prices, that will definitely take out a whole lot of people. The one thing that I see examples, I talk to people. You all see what I put on what I publish publicly in the Facebook group forums, but I also do a whole lot of private conversations with individuals, and I see what they're going through. And like one of the first signs that really scares me is when someone says they knew they weren't going to make any money doing a load, but they had to do a load because they had to get quick pay from the broker so they could immediately pay their insurance company. Because so if their insurance company didn't get the money, didn't get this amount of money for at this particular time, then the insurance company would shut their authority off. So you got guys, their last loads is those type of stories where I'm only doing this load. I know I won't make no money. I know I won't be able to eat. I won't be able to profit. I'll actually lose money, but I have to get $1,000 to pay my insurance company. I have to get that check and get it off to them before they shut my authority off. Man, that's such a bad situation. They got families at home that the wife is saying the only thing that's in the kitchen I'm reading stories like this. They're shooting comments. Open up the refrigerator and the only thing the food to eat is ketchup and mustard. Type condiments. It ain't like no real food in the refrigerator because the husband's not making any money out on the road and he's doing everything he can to survive. He just wants to. He knows that game over once the insurance cancels you.
I've got a question. I think something that I've preached and I coach a lot of people on and try to educate a lot of folks on, especially when you run and operate a business, because it's a different mindset from an operator or just somebody that's loves and passionate about trucking and just wants to do it because of the freedom and all that stuff, but they don't truly understand business. And what I mean by that is the numbers. They don't truly understand what their numbers mean. They don't properly adjust for, which is the perfect name for your group, the rate per mile. What does every portion of that money go towards? What is overhead? What's profit? What's tires? What's preventative maintenance? What's all these different things that I have to imagine you took an approach on early on, because you started with nothing. You started with a half tank of gas coming into the market. How did you set yourself up to be able to one thing that I gained a lot of respect for you, and among the million things that you do that impacts the trucking community, you've got over 35,000 members, but you have the balls to sit here and tell these people, park your truck. It's not even worth running this. Well, in that specific example, you are correct. They should not have ran that, but there at the mercy, and they got to the point where that money's already pre-spent. They're not even going to make any money, but in order to prolong and hopefully get another to fight another day, they're taking these loads, and it's wear and tear on the equipment, it's wear and tear on everything, it's strain on their relationships. They're not able to provide for the mouse that they're out to really feed, all these different things, and it's so sad that people get to that. And that's why I get so fired up and passionate about even trying to do this, is to keep people from being in that position. So what's something you did that set you up to be able to say, hey, you know what? I'm parking my truck. I'm going to go on a vacation. I'm going to go down to Mexico for 3 weeks until this thing chills out. And I'm not going to move my truck until I say so, because I'm an owner operator and I control my destiny. How'd you get there?
I constantly, from very beginning, I'm a numbers person. I understand numbers. I might not be able to be the, get A's in school like everybody else did, but I understand numbers. Numbers, they don't lie. And I was fascinated at the very beginning. I worked really hard all my life. I grew up here in Kentucky. I used to, when the other kid, before I got a job at McDonald's, and I couldn't get a job at McDonald's at 15, 14, 12 years old. So I'd go work on farms. I worked really hard all my life. And in the Marine Corps, it doesn't, even though I picked up rank pretty fast in the Marine Corps, it didn't pay very good. And then being a company driver, that didn't pay good. But when I first started driving a truck and I started getting money from these brokers and how much money they were paying me, I'm like, man, this is more money than I've ever made before. And I'm like, I don't want to, I only want to do, the really high paying loads. And I was very attracted to that. And if you do the spot market long enough, you're going to see these up and down roller coasters. This is the most, this is probably the biggest dramatic swing up and swing down that I've ever seen. And we still have not felt the complete swing down of what we're going through right now. But in the past, when the ups and downs would take place, I protected my downside whenever I bought the truck with credit cards. I had it in my head, like, they'll never take this truck from me because credit cards don't come and take your truck from you. The title is free and clear. Actually, I used the title because I bought it with credit cards. They don't put the title is free and clear, no lien and all on it. So I used the title as collateral to buy the trailer down the road. I'm like, I know you're not going to give me a loan, but you can have this truck that I just bought because I'm a title free and clear as collateral if you let me buy your trailer and make payments. Anyway, that's how I got the trailer too. But I protected the downside because I knew they weren't going to take the truck. And so and that's how the rate per mile became so important. Is I remember January, and we're getting ready to come up on January. It's not that very far away. And I just remember, like, I would use the hot market map on DAT, and the whole map, blue stands for nothing. There's no loads at all. And I remember being at home, like, where am I going to go? There ain't nothing. I'm like, wherever I go, I need to make enough money wherever I go to go there and make it back home, because if not, I'm going to be stuck. There's no loads anywhere. It was completely dead for like 2 or 3 months. And so I started focusing on really short runs that nobody else would do. It didn't make sense, but to leave the house, to go to Cincinnati, to pick up a load, go to Elizabethtown, and come back home, can I turn that into $2 per mile all the way around? I could. And at that time, fuel was cheap enough, and be back at home. And I could do that little round trip and be home. It wasn't great money, but it was. Someone mentioned this in the group, and I loved what they said. I'm going to steal it from them. They said, "Some motion is better than no motion. Slow motion is better than no motion." I think that's what they said.
Yeah.
But kind of makes sense. I mean, making some money is better than no money, and I was still staying profitable. That I was still I'm able to pay for my maintenance. I'm able to bring a check home. I had at that time, I think my house was being close to paid off. I lived in a small house. Anyway, but I tell that story that I told earlier. I did eventually get my wife and kids back, and I got into a new house. But I mean, I didn't.
That's a good news.
I was able to piece all that stuff back together. Of course, I'm living a little bit better than I was back then. Anyway, that was one way, and hopefully by saying that, it'll stick with people. That rate per mile, if the numbers don't work, you cannot be out there working for free and getting paid less than anybody else, and taking those cheap loads and doing something local turned into great money, turned into really good money. That led into doing power only. And see, here's another thing. When we get another tip for your audience, as we come out of this rut that we're in right now, one of the hottest things that'll be the loads that will pay the most that you don't need no trailer at all for is power only. That was something I took advantage of. I met the power only because as we come out, a lot of these trucking companies, they're going to be thin on drivers. They're not hiring drivers like they used to be. They're going to be very thin on drivers, and but they're going to start bringing. They're going to have more loads. The market's going to start to pick up, and they're going to try to bring on more drivers. But during that time, while they're trying to bring on drivers, they're going to have a whole lot of extra power only loads that need to get moved. We're the people that can jump in there and do it for them, save the day for them, and run those power onlys. And some of those loads are so easy and pay so good to do. And that was one of the lifesavers for me. I mean, as the market shrink, there was less good places to go to. Then I just started focusing on right here at the house, round trip, wherever I go. I got to make enough money to go there and come back. And then I would throw myself out there. Not only do I do van, but I do power only as well. And that led into going to the same shippers, the same receivers. Working on a dumbbell from Lexington to Nashville. I mean, that's when everybody was hurting. That was like my biggest money load right there. Was going back and forth to Lexington, Nashville.
The stuff that people were overlooking. And I think resilience is key for you, man. And obviously it resonates through your backstory all the way till now. Is you're hard working, you find a way, you're resilient, you're going to review what's going on and then react accordingly and do it with your best interest in mind and perseverance in mind. So I admire that, Chad. I really do. That's
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I think that people need to take that away. I think that people you mentioned it, like, this is the most money I've ever seen. It's so easy, I think, for people to see that money and think that they have all that money. You know what I mean? And that's not the truth. We know that. You got to buy tires, you got to buy fuel, you got to pay taxes, you got to pay insurance, you got to pay all the different things that people want from you now. All of a sudden, it's like, all right, I got to pay all this money out. And at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, you had all that money, but that's not all your money. It's not earmarked for you to go spend and buy a new car or do a vacation or whatever. I don't know what people do with their money. So I have to feel that when they get in that situation where this is my last load, I've got to pay the insurance or whatever the case may be. They had compounded a bunch of mistakes to get to that point, right? And that's what you got to start to educate. And I know you do a good job. I really try to. I know a lot of people out there will preach, from the mountaintops, and people choose to listen or not. They could be like me, you like to learn the hard way or the expensive way. I was told by my grandmother and all kinds of people, don't do stuff, and I did it anyway. And I paid the consequence, paid the price for it. So sometimes you got to learn the hard lessons on your own. But hopefully people will take something that you just said and apply it to their situation, life, their forward thinking, know their numbers. That's the biggest thing, I think. If you, and I don't know if you want to share, you don't have to, but if you would, it'd be awesome. Just, I think, to give people an idea of like, what does it take as an owner operator? And let's say they own their truck, own their trailer, or maybe have a note to run on a rate per mile basis. Like, how much would they have to make percentage wise to make it cost effective for them? Do you have an idea on that?
Everybody's going to be so different.
Even a percentage, right? Like, hey, best practice, you're doing everything right, and you clear, 3 to 10% profit for your company. Maybe even like that, something like that, just to give people an idea.
If your profit, your take home starts to get less than 30%, then you need to, percentage wise, I can really that's an easy one. If you start to get 25 to 30% is like the danger zone, where not danger zone or more of, you're better off going and being a company driver for UPS, Walmart. There's some good truck companies out there. If you start to get below that 30%, especially if you go below 25%, hey, it's time to redo things. You need to do things different a whole lot. They talk about relationship. A lot of people in the Facebook group, they talk about relationships. Relationships are important, and they do a whole lot for you. I don't talk probably enough about relationships, but relationships are really important as the market's down like this, like it is right now. And you can create those relationships with shippers, receivers, and brokers when the market's down like this. I would much rather work with someone that I have a relationship with than to work with than to go and compete in this market here. You'll never. I know it's a little bit off subject from what you were asking about, but
no, you're good. I love it.
That 30 to 25%. You're
Well, I think the relationship's huge, and if you're good for time, I've got a few more minutes. I'd love to dive into this because I think the difference between a contact and a contract is the R, and in my opinion, that R stands for relationship, right? It's built on trust, it's built on loyalty, it's built on respect. There's a bunch of things that come when you have an investment into a relationship. So I love that you brought that up, because I've been, that's how I've got to where I'm at. It's by doing right. It's building those relationships. It's being authentic. It's being like, you do what you say you're going to do, how you say you're going to do it, when you say you're going to get it done. Right. That's like the easiest way to not cause friction in a relationship. Or if there is a problem, we talk about it. I'm up front. You own it. We're going to get in front of this thing and we're going to discuss it and grow from it. But that's huge, man. So and I love that you said that, because I tell these clients all the time, right now is the time that you should be go getting relationships, building those contacts, getting the people to say, you know what, I might, and you might even take a little bit less, know your numbers. You might even take a little bit less now for that opportunity to establish a longer term play here, not just come in as the tide shifts, in my opinion. But what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on the topic of relationships is I I'm well known for maximizing getting the highest rate per mile, but that's whenever the market's doing good, and I chase the good markets. I go to those good markets and stay in those good markets. That's what I've done. I just taught myself. But whenever the market goes into a dip like this, or going into a dead market, like it's rarely, if you go look at all the times I've talked about loads in the past, it's rare that I ever go to the Northeast. It's rare that I ever go to Florida. It's rare that I ever go somewhere where it's a dead market, because my rate is so much. I'll take my backhaul with me. It's a saying I got from Rico. Guys listen. But he would talk about taking your backhaul with you. If you know Florida has a lot more trucks, I'm using this example. If you go to Florida, there's a lot more trucks than there are loads. Then how many miles are you going to need coming out of that market? And that's what you need. That's kind of where you need to charge, because if I go to Florida, I'm already pre-planned in my head. I'm going to deadhead out of Florida if it's dead. If there's more trucks now, it's in this market what we're in now. Most places have a lot more trucks than there are loads. Anyway, so in a situation like this, like we're in now, it's best to have the relationships to fall back on on relationships. Relationships help you out in so many ways. Like the January I told you before, and I'd go to Cincinnati to pick up a load. I'd go to the airport, and I mean, it was a relationship that I created by telling the broker. The broker would get fined if when the freight landed at the airport in Cincinnati. DHL, I think that had something to do with DHL. But if once it got through customs, the broker got charged so much per hour that the freight sat there. So she needed someone that guaranteed her that they would pick up those medical supplies and take them to where and get them off that airport lot. But she couldn't give a time of when it would happen. I'm like, if you can give me 90 minutes, I'll be there every single day. You call me, and I don't care what time it is. Damn, that was a relationship created. I got so much more. So there was like, at that time, everybody was looking for freight. At that time, because I created the relationship with her, I quit looking for it. And I didn't charge an outrageous amount. I told her, I said, I needed this much money to go to Cincinnati, pick it up, take it to where it needed to go, drop it off, and come back to my house. And it was something small. But by doing that, I created that relationship with her. I was the person she called all the time and gave all of her freight to. I mean, and the power only, I used to do for AAA Cooper. This is the first time I ever told this story. But the relationship I created with them, AAA would by contract would have to go through a certain broker. I was doing and this is during a really bad time. But because I created a relationship with the people that worked in that warehouse at AAA, and the broker was somewhat of a relationship, but I was around those people at AAA all the time that they remembered the name of my truck, and they looked me up. They couldn't get a hold of the broker. They had a load that had to go, an emergency load that had to go, and they remembered the name of my truck, and the people at the warehouse called me, and I went and completed the load, and I had to bring the trailer back. It was a round trip. And I called the broker up, and this is a relationship I created with the broker. I said, I just did this load. And she says, well, I never knew nothing about it. That's because the warehouse called me and they didn't call you. But I couldn't take the broker out of the situation, and I wouldn't. But and I already had a relationship with the broker, and she's like, okay, well, I'll pay for it, And it was the same rate that I always charged them. I mean, yeah, relationships are so great when they work out, and right now with the way it is, yeah, instead of chasing the market, sit back, make things easier for yourself, and get a relationship going. It will come back, and you can go back to doing your normal thing, chasing the spot rates. That's what I've always done. Or you can stay with the relationship you've created.
I
Triple A
think
would
that's
take me back in a heartbeat if I went over there.
I mean, yeah, it sounds like, and that's sound advice, man. And I think that is the resilience factor there. And it's just a way that people need to think and be a little bit outside the box, be a little bit more creative or open minded, and not just so set on what worked for them up till this point. But like, you got to look at what's going to work moving forward too. So I think that people, if you're not engaged with Chad or you're not in his group, go onto Facebook, go to Rate Per Mile Masters. I know he has a website, rpmmaster.com, but the Facebook group's probably the most active. They talk about detention pay, they talk about the rates, they talk about the market, they talk about trucking, and you name it. I mean, I know that you got relationships with everybody. There's so much value that you bring there. So I really just encourage everyone to go check out what Chad has to say and what he's built and what he's done. It's in my opinion, probably the most impressive group, at over 35,000 members. And I can't even begin to imagine how many trucking companies and families you've impacted over that time frame. It's a lot. It's probably uncountable at this point, but that's awesome,
I appreciate
Chad.
that someone like yourself recognizes that.
Man, I think that it's so cool, man. I'm grateful for you taking the time to come chat with me. I truly am, Chad. Thank you so much for sharing those. I know that that's valuable. It's helped me. It's opened my eyes to a couple things that even I didn't know, man. So I think that that's awesome. So, is there how else can people get a hold of you, maybe follow you or find out more about you?
I really I put a lot of focus in the Facebook group.
Just go to the Facebook group.
Yeah, the Facebook group, right? I know I've been on there. I mean, what other Facebook group that's been around for 9 years? Usually they give up and go to crap after a while. I mean, 9 years. I've moderated and read every single post for 9 years. Every single post that gets posted in that group, every comment. It's just my passion. It's what I like to do. I love doing it. I mean, how many people? I mean, like if I did the last speech I did at Matt's, I did the math on it. It was like reading the Bible. Like if you count up all the reading that I do and moderation and approving comments and posts, it was like reading the Bible 3 times a year with all the reading that I have to do from the beginning of it. I mean, in the partnerships that I've created a partnership with the Triumph Business Capital. I like that. Now, I mean, one thing that we didn't talk about, we'll have to go, maybe we can hit it on later, is we didn't talk about this week, the National Trucker Appreciation Week.
And this is dropping a little bit late, but yeah, huge shout out in Trucking Appreciation Week. And yes, go ahead and talk about Triumph. I know that they ran something on that you endorsed, so you're good.
Well, the one thing that I'm doing this week is I'm spotlighting the companies that do appreciate truck drivers. Yep. The companies that do appreciate, and the 2 companies I've mentioned so far was C.H. Robinson. Absolutely, they appreciate truck drivers. Look at how massive they are. And I handle a lot of problems for guys when they have problems with brokers. I'll even call the broker up myself and talk to them. I've done that 100 times, and I get results when I do it. But how many times have I done that with C.H. Robinson? And I know the top people. I used to go bowling with the previous CEO. Well, only one time. But Bob, I liked him. He made that company. I hope the CEO, fingers crossed, the new CEO keeps C.H. Robinson as good as they are. Triumph is another one. It's another company I've been working with for 6-7 years. We do millions. The group members, people in that group that I brought to Triumph, does millions of factoring loads with Triumph every single week, not month, every single week for the past 6 to 7 years. And I can go. The CEOs in the group, I know the head people, the head of marketing is in my Facebook group. I'm friends with them. I've been to Texas and hung out with them. I can at any time call any of them I need to and get any problem I need to taken care of. How many times have I had to take care of problems with them? Never, hardly ever. I mean, sometimes somebody will be like,
you get people bitching, but I think a lot of those are unfounded, right? I really do. But yes, I agree.
That's so for Driver Appreciation Week. I like spotlighting the companies truly appreciate drivers, and they've shown it.
Yeah.
Those are two that I've done so far. I'll come up with some more before the
You
end.
will, just to like show, like my motives when doing this was to truly give back and not be selfish and that kind of stuff. And I know Chad, we had chatted prior to coming on, was a concern of his because I own a trucking insurance brokerage, but Chad works with Reliant or Reliance, right?
Reliance Partners.
Yeah, Reliance Partners, and you can feature that. Go ahead and talk about them too, man.
Yes.
I think they're good
Okay, great.
people. I've heard nothing but great things. I see how they operate and I see how they treat their customers, which aligns with us. So, like for me, there's a lot of bad people out in the industry that maybe aren't. I don't know, but like they're one of the good ones. So go ahead and talk about them, just so you guys know.
Yes. Because you brought them up, and I had this paper sitting over here. I just talked to one of the. We have an agent that works for Reliance Partners. Her name is Nicole. I get stats from them. One guy was paying $38,000, and I have this wrote down, and not because I knew you were going. I didn't even know you were going to ask me, but I had this wrote down because I like playing with numbers. One guy was paying, an owner operator was paying $38,000. Reliance Partners got him down to $20,000. Another guy was paying another owner operator $28,000, got him down to $12,500. The biggest one, a guy was paying. He had a really bad record. So I'm not going to say his name. He was paying $280,000 is what he got quoted. I don't know if he ever paid it, but that's what his renewal was going to be, was $280,000. And this he had a fleet of trucks, and Reliance Partners got him down to $111,000.
Huge.
I mean, think about how good. I cannot, because I'm not a sales agent. I don't get paid commission. I get a flat rate from Reliance Partners by recommending them. If I did get paid commission, my gosh, I'd make all kinds of money from Reliance Partners. But I'm not licensed in those
Get your
states.
license, Chad. You can get paid.
You have to be licensed in all those states. But Reliance Partners has been like one of the best people I've ever gotten partners with. Look at how, and they've grown. They're like one of the biggest there is. Yeah, I mean, I just, it's just, it feels so good to see, like, to be able to, I'm saving you this much money, by getting over to Reliance Partners and seeing the results from that. Our rep over there is Nicole. They're one of the biggest. They shop markets that some companies that they don't shop. Just a one-stop shop that gets for your insurance. I feel. I mean, I've been so thankful that I partnered with them. Anyway, our rep, you can see that in the Facebook group too. Our rep that you would want to talk to is Nicole over there.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, my intent on this podcast was pure, and I know that was a concern of yours, so I just wanted to make sure to address. But that being said, though, there's other partners, though, and I mean, there's different synergies and things that Chad endorses that I really think you go look at and take a benefit, and everything comes with, for the most part, a discount. Some things you can and can't. There's regulatory bodies, so like everyone kind of know that going in. But awesome, Chad. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate you taking the time to come on, and I look forward to this thing dropping, and hopefully you gain a little bit more followers in this, and people perk up and listen up and figure out how to run these trucking companies better, man. I appreciate you.
Well, I thank you. I thanks for coming on here. This was fun. Good talking to you.
Yeah, man.